So let's talk about this article that you sent me in Forbes, Kelly. This was the article titled "In Real Estate, 2022 has been the year of moving farther away." And what they're talking about in this article is the past 33 years, NAR, which is where they're getting this information from, National Association of Realtors. They do a study or a survey, I guess, every year, and they ask buyers and sellers. In this case, buyers. They ask them questions like, "Where did you move from? How far away was it?" And for the past 33 years, that number's always been somewhere around 15 miles. The new house that they're buying is about 15 miles from the old house they're buying, which of course is, I guess, the average. I'm sure some people are moving across the country, but some people are moving down the street. So it averages to 15 miles. This year, that number increased to 50 miles. So it went up like times three. Um, I'm not surprised by this. What's actually surprising to me is that we didn't see this number sooner, like in 2021 or 2020, or even prior to that. Everybody knows, obviously, with COVID, more people are working from home now, so people have more remote flexibility. They're able to move further away for different reasons. I was even seeing that like back in 2018, 2019. Um, Obviously, not on the same scale. I think working from home is one of the things that was probably important to people who were looking to do that, obviously. Uh, More people are working from home now than were then, but there were still a lot of people working from home in 2018 and 2019. And not only that, but inventory levels of homes were down as they are now. Again, COVID and lockdowns and all of that stuff just kind of amplified and magnified all of these circumstances that were already there in the marketplace. But um, inventory's down, prices of homes are up. I think one of the other things that doesn't get talked about a lot is like technology and how that plays a role in it. It's really easy for a buyer to go on Zillow.com or Realtor.com or their agent's website. Maybe the agent sends them a property, they go to the website, and they look at a couple photos, they look at a couple other houses in the same neighborhood, and then that's it. There's not a lot of houses for sale in the neighborhood. So you go into the map and you zoom out or you scroll across the screen and it takes you to a different area. It's just that easy. And if you're bored and you're sitting there and you might decide, hey, what can I get in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, even though you're looking in the North Hills, maybe you live in the North Hills now. And then you kind of discover that, hey, depending on how far south I go, I can get a really nice house in Peters Township for a lot less than I can get a lot less than I can get up here in the North Hills, for example. And I've had a lot of buyers that will come into our office and we sit down and we do like a consultation. They're living in the North Hills and they say, yeah, we want to live up here in the North Hills. We go out and we show them like 3 or 4 houses because that's all there are on the market that fit their criteria. And then they send me a link and go, hey, this is kind of crazy, but what do you think about this? And it's like a Zillow link or it's a link even to our own website, but the house is in like Murraysville or something like that, miles and miles away. So I've seen that increasing over the past few years, um, mostly having to do with inventory, but then again, as prices have gone up, we talked about this last week when you and I were in Coriopolis. Um, how we've seen that area. I think the increase was like 70% appreciation in
Mm-hmm.
prices because the demand has gone up because there's more buyers there now than there was before. Buyers from other areas, whether it's Robinson or Moon, or even like in the North Hills, or even in the South Hills, Upper St. Clair, Mount Lebanon, some of these areas where maybe people have grown up and now they're looking to buy a home, they're going to be priced out of those neighborhoods for their first home. Not all the time, but certainly a lot of younger buyers, that are still climbing the ladder and don't have the income um, that is going to make them competitive with some of the, yeah, I don't know what that is. Today's cleaning day at my house. Um, so yeah, I mean, buyers that are still kind of climbing that income ladder that are maybe priced out of their neighborhood where they grew up or the neighborhood where they want to be, and now they're starting to expand their search and go, okay, what can we get, just a couple miles from here down the road. Um, we see that in like Coriopolis. I've seen that a lot in like Ambridge and Economy. These areas that are just like right on the other side of the line between Allegheny County and Beaver County. Of course, I grew up in Allegheny County. we didn't even know where Ambridge was when I was a kid. I didn't know where Ambridge was until I started selling real estate, and again start looking around. How far do you have to go to get a decent house for 150 or $200,000, and that takes you, hey, this is just 15 minutes, over the hill. Um, it's not too far from Wexford. It's not too far from the North Hills. It's still pretty convenient, but I can get a lot more house, and the property taxes are a lot less. And what I think probably has happened in 2022 is more people forced to go further. I know, like for us, when we bought our house, or moved, I should say, before this current house that we're in now in 2021, we were looking in Cranberry. I don't think we really ever thought about living in Cranberry or necessarily wanted to live in Cranberry. I would go as far as to say we really didn't want to live in Cranberry, but that was the only place where we knew that we were going to be able to afford something. And of course, we thought that we could make it work. We kind of talked ourselves into it a little bit, and it wasn't bad. After 13 months, we decided we were going to move back home, and bite the bullet on taxes and affordability and cost and all of that
Oh
stuff.
wow, just 13 months.
13 months. That's how long we were in Cranberry, which was not bad. Obviously, I'm in real estate, so I help people move all the time. Shouldn't have been a bad experience. It was a bad experience, but that's for other reasons because of our movers. But that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother podcast and video. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm totally not surprised about this study, where people are moving a lot farther now than they were before. Um, the other thing that I'm seeing, and you kind of can sense this when I'm talking about areas like Coriopolis and Ambridge. These are, you know, eh, home buyers don't really look at it this way. Like owner occupants, people that are buying a home to live in, families, whatever it may be. But investors always want to classify neighborhoods like A, B, C, D neighborhoods. Um, an A neighborhood would be like McCandless or Hampton or maybe even like Ross Township. That is what an investor would call an A neighborhood. The prices of homes are expensive. There's not a lot of rentals in the area, so like the rental, um, the amount that you can get for rent is not as high in proportion to what you would have to pay for the price. That's how investors look at it. And then your B neighborhoods would be like, Westview, Bellevue. Um, I'm trying to think. Like Ingram, it's in a good school district. It's Montour School District, which is certainly like an A school district, um, but it's not quite as nice, right? Um, Again, Westview, where I grew up, Bellevue, some of these areas we would consider like a B neighborhood. A C neighborhood, I shouldn't say we would consider them that. A lot of investors would look at it that way. A C neighborhood would be like, um, a Coriopolis or an Ambridge or one of those. What we started seeing earlier this year was in like the D neighborhoods, the neighborhoods where we have investors that are selling houses for like under $100,000 that are in bad shape, um, that have had longtime tenants in there that didn't really take care of the place, that kind of thing, and they're in neighborhoods where there's a lot of rental properties, so you kind of have that anywhere you have like a concentration of renters who aren't necessarily taking good care of their properties, and that's on the landlords too, right? A lot of landlords will say like, yeah, I've had this tenant in there forever. They never complain about their rent's low, but they never complain about anything. Well, the tenant doesn't want to complain because they don't want their rent to go up, but at the same time, you know, you kind of want the tenant to complain about some stuff. If you've got a leak in your roof, you don't really want the tenant, like, it's nice that they're not complaining, but at the same time, like, you should probably want to know about that so you can fix your roof rather than let it completely destroy your property. And then it gets too bad, and the tenant says, well, we can't live here anymore, we're leaving. And now the owner's stuck with this, you know, property that's in really bad shape. Unfortunately, I see that a lot, and it's common in like the D neighborhoods. Um, we put a couple of these houses on the market earlier this year, and we were and I was telling the sellers, like, what's going to happen here is another investor is going to come in and buy this. They're going to need to do a lot of work to it to even get the rental income that they're going to want to get. This is kind of where that threshold lies of how much work they're going to have to put into it, for how much rent they could get out of it versus how much rent they probably want to get out of it based on how much they're paying. So we kind of find that like balance there of that number where we think the house is going to sell for 115,000, and we put it on the market obviously 115,000 is a pretty low price in our current market. The median sales price in Pittsburgh is 230, so you're talking about like half of the median price. Um, we'd put it on the market and we would just get overwhelmed with all of these owner occupant buyers with FHA mortgages and low money down grants and things like that. And it's these buyers that aren't even familiar with the areas at all, but it's 5 miles away, 10 miles away from where they grew up in Robinson, or even Coriopolis. We start to see some buyers priced out of areas like Coriopolis because again the prices went up 70%. So now they're moving into areas like Sheridan in the city limits, where we have these like $115,000 properties. We get multiple offers. The house would sell for 145, which is way more than what the seller even thinks it's worth, or we think it's worth. And then the buyers do a home inspection and they find like all these problems, and it's like, well, you should have. That's why we priced it at 115,000 to reflect the condition. You're the one that came in and offered to spend more money, right? And then, they don't really have the money to make the repairs, so it's hard to come to an agreement in a case like that. So that was one thing we noticed earlier this year. We don't do a ton of investment properties, although we did do a good bit of them this year. But that was one of the things that we noticed a lot with investment properties. But even before this year, again, the distance thing has definitely kicked in. When we have people selling homes in McCandless and in North Allegheny School District, and finding out that they can not only can they get a whole lot more house and a whole lot more property for their money out in like South Butler School District in Butler County, but the taxes are like a third of what they're already currently paying. So they can basically, for the same amount they're paying on their mortgage that they got in 2010, it's 5.5%. We were finding out that when they were down to even 3.5%, not the rock bottom that they went down to, but even when they were down pretty low at 3.5%, by the time you factor in the property taxes and everything, I mean, it wasn't costing people too much more to upgrade from a house that they paid probably $250,000 for in 2010 up to a house that's $550,000 now. So that the interest rate affordability thing, I think, was also a factor. I think that's going to play into what happens next. And this is probably getting into a little bit of what agents should be doing, what this means to like buyers and sellers. I think what agents should be doing now more than ever in this market, where of course everybody's talking about like this shift in the market due to the interest rates and everything. I think that's a lot of the shift thing is over exaggerated. I think right now we're in a seasonal shift because of the time of the year. But what I think that a lot of agents should be focused on is the same thing that I always think agents should be focused on, which is what we call lead generation, which is what our clients hire us to do. If you're a seller client, you're looking to hire an agent to go out there and find you a buyer. If you're a buyer, you're looking for an agent to go out there and find you a seller or find you a house. So I think that agents need to be talking to more people. I think we need to be connectors and kind of like matchmakers. Um, you know, with the inventory still being low and affordability being important, agents are going to need to be able to, find solutions and make suggestions. Even if it's a crazy suggestion, say, hey, I know that you are pretty adamant about this area or this neighborhood. If you guys get to the point where you're thinking about expanding that search, I did come across a pretty nice house this morning, in this other area. It's 15 miles away. I don't know what you know about it, but I can get you some information on it. And just making like those kind of suggestions. As a seller, working with an agent who's having those conversations with, other clients or other people every single day, I think is important. Putting a sign up in the yard and, putting it on the MLS and waiting for, somebody else just to kind of find it. And there's cases where we know when we go in to a house and I'll ask the seller like, hey, do you think your ideal buyer is going to be coming from this area, or where do you think? And sometimes that answer is like, yeah, whoever buys this house in this neighborhood is somebody who's definitely, probably familiar with this area or familiar with this neighborhood. It's just a typical house of what you would expect to find in this area. Um, you know, people in this area don't really leave very often. You know, a lot of second generation people in the neighborhood. What did I miss? Do you have any questions, Kelly, or any, not questions, but comments about any of that stuff that I just said?
So, do you have kind of have like idea or like percentage of the past clients like in the past couple of years when they initially they had like idea of that's
Mm-hmm.
like certain area they're looking to, but you kind of like recommended like a house that's maybe close by or within like 10-15 miles.
Yeah, good question. So Jeremy obviously on our team works with a lot more buyers. And I know that typically when Jeremy's out there with buyers, he's showing them houses all over the place. Um, Jeremy's percentage is probably very high because I know that from firsthand experience, like where I've met with a buyer, they tell me exactly what they're looking for. I bring Jeremy into it. I introduce them. I say, you know, we're going to work together and help you find something. And then Jeremy calls me the next day and he's like, they want to make an offer on this house
Oh
in
wow.
Upper St. Clair. And I'm like, they were looking in Cranberry. Um, I would say from personal experience, mostly like prior to Jeremy coming on my team, which again takes it back to like 2019, um, where I was working with the buyers, you know, myself obviously. Um, it's a pretty high percentage, whether it's a completely different school district or completely different area, or even just like a different neighborhood or different part of the school district, a different part of the area. So, like this is a national average. This survey is done nationally. Pittsburgh, of course, is a little bit different. 50 miles in Pittsburgh is a lot. 15 miles in Pittsburgh is a lot. You can go 15 miles and be an hour away in Pittsburgh, right? So, depending on what direction you're going with the rivers and the bridges and everything. And there's parts of like Ross Township, for example. I mean, I don't know how big it is. It's probably 10 to 15 miles in length, I guess, from one end to the other. It goes from the city limits in Brighton Heights, um, and over by Perrysville Avenue and Summer Hill and all of that stuff over near the city, all the way up to like near Allison Park and McCandless and Hampton and all of that up Thompson Run. So, I mean, it could take you a good 25 minutes depending on traffic. It could take you 25 minutes to get from one end of Ross Township to the other. So you'd still be in the same school district. You might even be in the same elementary school, depending if it's Ross Elementary. Um, so it's not that much of a change, but it could change everything else. It could change which grocery store you shop at, which gym you go to. Your commute time for work is going to be drastically different if
Hmm.
you're commuting to work. But so we've seen a lot of that with just again, I think that has to do with prices and inventory. The agents that are like the neighborhood experts, and this, who knows? We'll see what happens in the future. But there's real estate agents that have branded themselves and marketed themselves for years as, I'm the expert on Sewickley, or I'm the expert on Hampton, or I'm the expert on North Hills Estates. If you're the expert on a neighborhood like North Hills Estates the past 3 years, where I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 houses have sold per year, and not everybody in that neighborhood, no matter how good you are, you're not going to have 100% of the market share, right? So if you've got 60% of the market share and you specialize in North Hills Estates, then you sell 3 houses a year, right? So that's not really enough to keep you in business, and it's not a sustainable business. And if you don't have a sustainable business, then again, you don't have the lead flow, as we call it, where when somebody lists their house with you for sale, you don't know who the buyers are, because the buyers that were looking at the neighbor's house that you sold down the street 7 months ago, most of them have already moved on and sold another house. So like we do a lot of business in like Village at Pine, but it's the same thing there. I think when I say a lot of business, we sold 3 homes there this year. We sold 3 homes last year, maybe four. Um, and I don't know, maybe going back a little bit the year before that, maybe a couple. Um, we plan to do a lot more business there in the future, but we we don't, you're not going to see a billboard that says Mr. Village at Pine with my face on it, right? Um, and that goes back to the same thing that I'll ask the clients. Like if I'm meeting with the seller in Hampton, do you think that the buyer who's looking at your house is going to be looking in Hampton, from Hampton, familiar with the area? And they say, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I would say that that's probably true. Before we moved to Hampton, I had no intentions of moving here. I grew up right down the street, um, in a different school district, and I had different flexibility where, yeah, I could see us going, sending our kids to North Allegheny or Pine Richland or even like up to Cranberry like we did. I never saw us living in Hampton, but here we are, right? So inventory had a lot to do with that, and pricing, and just what was available out there. Um, which, that is everything when we're talking about with the client. Here's what we're going to do to market your house. Do we need to market all the aspects about living in Hampton and what that lifestyle entails? Well, probably not if that person's already familiar with Hampton, right? We can do a little bit of that because nothing's ever 100%, nothing's absolute. But if we have a pretty good feeling that most of the buyers who come to look at your house are already familiar with the neighborhood and looking specifically in this neighborhood, then we don't need to talk as much about the neighborhood. We need to promote the house. If we're doing a house in Coriopolis, for example, we know that those buyers could be coming from anywhere. And it's not necessarily about the house. They're probably there because it's one of the only houses available to them, whether it's their price range or just the inventory based on time of the year or whatever. Um, and there's some nice older homes in Coriopolis. A lot of potential in terms of the character and everything like that, right? And some of them have been fixed up really well and are in really great condition already. So it's a little bit like up and coming in that sense, or on a comeback. Um, and there's some businesses moving in there. Of course, that's what we were spending time there, going over the area and the neighborhood. The homes in that area are going to almost to an extent sell themselves. Now we still have to market them with like good professional photos and all of that. But what we really have to sell people on, if I could use that word, in an area like Coriopolis, is the area, is the lifestyle. Figuring most of the people, since the prices have gone up 70% in the last couple of years, that means that people who were buying houses there 5 years ago might even be priced out of that market today. We're probably looking at buyers that are coming from outside of the area who never even considered it, may not be familiar with it at all. And we really need to sell the lifestyle at that point. So, and I think that I think that's one of the important things. So we've always kind of like diversified on our team where we can specialize in a little bit of everything, which isn't really specializing at all, I realize. Um, but it is a specialty in a sense because we work with a lot of clients that are looking all over town. We work with clients that are relocating here from out of state that don't know the difference between north, south, east, and west, right? So we have to know a little bit about a lot of different areas. Um, and, of course, one of the things that we're focusing on, like with going to Coriopolis and spending a day there and checking out different coffee shops and restaurants and just walking around different businesses. I mean, first of all, it's great that in that area you could do that, but it also makes us a little bit more familiar with that area. If we have somebody coming in from out of town, we can share from personal experience a little bit about that. So I think agents need to do, and a lot of agents probably do a really good job of getting out there and hitting up coffee shops more so than the lead generation part. But I think you really need to do both. It's like a form of networking almost in a way too. We weren't really networking with people so much, but we were just like, if we were gonna network with people, I guess where would those people even be, right? And just kind of getting out there amongst the people and not being contained in the office, just focused on making phone calls. But I think that both are really important. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's right. Yeah, because I like the point that you mentioned, like, a year ago you didn't know you would probably end up being in Hampton. That's what happened to
Right,
me. I relocated to like Pittsburgh, and a year ago I was living in downtown Pittsburgh,
right,
and I didn't know like north, south, west, east, like which side is better. So I
right.
did like some research on my own. For example, I think north is the only direction, or maybe one of the direction that you don't need to go through tunnels. So that was like one of the like
To get to
yeah, to
downtown?
get to
Yeah.
downtown. So that was like because like my school was in downtown, so I had to
Oh,
put that into like consideration.
right.
Yeah, and then I was like, I didn't look at Cranberry at all. Like the Cranberry is like the area where I'm living right now. But like my friend recommended it to me, and I was like, that's like 30 minutes away from where I lived before. That's kind of far. But I ended up like looking for houses in this area because actually visit the area and it's really convenient location. So I feel like a lot of people they don't realize that the area they might be moving to in the future.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's another perfect example. Um, Cranberry is probably one of those areas too, where like a lot of the people that are buying homes there this year and next year, I mean, the values of homes aren't going to go down. If the interest rates stay up, the homes will start staying on the market a little bit longer, so that'll help with the inventory. But the inventory is still going to be down. We still have this big population chunk, this millennial, um, primarily like millennial age group generation, where a lot of them still need to buy homes, right? A lot of the millennials who grew up in Cranberry are not necessarily affording to buy homes in Cranberry now. That's like Conway. We've sold a whole ton of homes over in Conway this year, which is Freedom School District. It's in Beaver County. Even people in Cranberry, other than Freedom Road, they don't know why it's called Freedom Road. It's called that because it takes you to a place called Freedom, like 10 minutes down the road. Um, it a lot of the buyers who were looking at our houses in Conway were seeing our posts on Facebook, or their agent sent it to them, or wherever they were seeing it, and they were like, "Oh my God, that house is beautiful, and it's only $250,000, or I think the one was $170,000. Oh my God, look at that yard! Like, look at everything it has. Where is this? Oh, it's only 10 or 15 minutes away. Yeah, who cares what school district it's in if they're a first time home buyer that doesn't have kids in the district." Um, who cares as long as it's not as long as they're not going to have trouble with resale value. um, Most people don't care about the school district, and that's another thing that went away in the last few years because nobody was worried about resale value because the appreciation's
Mm-hmm.
15% per year for a couple years in a row. Nobody's thinking like, oh, am I going to have trouble selling this house in 2 years? Like, you had trouble buying the house because people were beating each other over the head to get it, and you finally won that war and you got the house. You're not thinking, oh, I wonder if this is going to completely turn around and in 2 years nobody's going to want to buy a house here. And for the most part, I don't see that happening. Um, I do think that as the inventory grows a little bit, we will see some people, uh, more not some people, but I should say more people, finding their house in their dream neighborhood. So that might slow down some of that expansion a little bit. Again, I'm surprised with these numbers that it stayed steady at 15 miles as long as it did, and then shot up to 50 just this current year, 2022. Um, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was like, 25, 30, 30, 35, and then shot up to 50. So we'll see what happens next year if it's 40 or something like that. I don't know that it'll continue expanding. I know a lot of businesses are calling people like back to work in the office. um, I know people that moved and got really far away from their office because they didn't think they would ever have to go back, and now they do, even if it's only like 2 days a week, right? So that's a difference. I think there's a lot of things that, um, you know the workforce in general, the economy in the country, and everybody needs to find out and figure out.